Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are embarking on a journey into a pretty profound shift in perspective. Much of human philosophy is all about building structures, right? Creating these neat little conceptual boxes to organize reality and just make sense of everything. Well, the philosophy we're unpacking today, it does the exact opposite. It's a total, systematic dismantling of those structures. We're looking at a deeply unsettling mystery that has challenged thinkers for thousands of years. And the answer? It is so remarkably counterintuitive that people are still intensely debating it 2 millennia after it was first proposed. But stick with me, because while it starts as this giant philosophical puzzle, it ultimately leads to the absolute ultimate in cognitive freedom.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to imagine taking away absolutely everything you use to define the world around you. Literally strip away the names of things, remove the categories, erase all the definitions of what you call an object, or how you fundamentally conceptualize it. When you wipe away all of that linguistic and conceptual scaffolding, what is actually there? It's a seriously difficult mental exercise. Our brains are these highly efficient categorizing engines. We rely on shortcuts and language to carve up reality into neat, digestible, separate objects just to get through our day. We naturally want to cling to those definitions because, well, they give us a sense of stability. But what happens when we finally let go of that grip?
Well, we get a radical answer from ancient India. A brilliant mind living around the 2nd century AD decided to dedicate his entire life to grappling with exactly that question. His name was Nagarjuna, and he was a Buddhist monk. Now, to understand why his work was so incredibly disruptive, you kind of have to look at the intellectual vibe of his era. At the time, all these different philosophical schools in India were obsessively debating the fundamental substance of reality. They were arguing over whether the universe was made of indivisible atoms, or eternal souls, or some sort of permanent cosmic essence. And Nagarjuna, he walks right into this crowded, intense intellectual arena and completely upends the whole debate. He didn't just propose a new foundational substance. Instead, he rigorously pulled apart every single assumption the human mind naturally makes about reality. He fundamentally denied the premise of independent substance entirely.
He arrived at a conclusion that is honestly, conceptually staggering. Nothing has inherent existence. Let that sink in for a second. Nagarjuna realized that absolutely nothing exists completely from its own side. When philosophers talk about inherent existence, sometimes called swabhava in Sanskrit, they mean this independent, unchanging, intrinsic essence. For example, we tend to assume a wooden table possesses some core tableness that exists entirely independent of its individual parts, or its environment, or the human mind looking at it. Nagarjuna systematically argued that this is a complete illusion. Not the physical objects around you, not the people in your life, not even the self you currently refer to as I. Everything, without a single exception, lacks this isolated, independent core. The very foundation of what you perceive as solid reality, it simply isn't what it appears to be.
Nagarjuna had a specific term for this profound realization, sunyata. Now, this word is most commonly translated into English as emptiness, but we have to be incredibly careful with how we interpret that. In everyday language, emptiness implies a void, right? Like a cup with no water in it. But philosophical emptiness is entirely different. When Nagarjuna speaks of sunyata, he absolutely does not mean reality is empty of experience. He certainly isn't suggesting that life is empty of beauty or meaning or love or even the very real sensation of pain. Sunyata specifically means the emptiness of inherent existence. It means the world is entirely empty of the fixed, solid, permanent nature that our minds are just constantly projecting onto it. Reality is incredibly dynamic and deeply full of relationships, but it is entirely empty of isolated identity.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it highlights the absolute biggest misunderstanding about Nagarjuna. People hear the word emptiness and they immediately jump to nihilism, but Nagarjuna was fiercely opposed to nihilism. Nihilism is this depressing fatalism, right? It asserts that nothing is real, nothing matters, and existence is basically just a giant, dark void. Sunyata is a far more sophisticated and honestly crucial idea. Things do exist, but they exist dependently. This touches on a core concept called dependent origination. Think about a towering oak tree. That tree doesn't just exist independently out of nowhere. It is the miraculous convergence of a seed, the soil, rainfall, sunlight, and time. It exists entirely in relation to its context. So Sunyata doesn't negate existence at all. Rather, it elegantly explains how things exist. They exist within this massive, interconnected web of continuously shifting conditions.
Let's anchor this abstract philosophy into our actual lived reality. I want you to picture something right now that you are deeply afraid of losing.
Take a second. Maybe it's a cherished relationship, your physical health, or even your fundamental sense of identity. That relationship you're holding on to, it's not a static, fixed object that you can just place on a shelf. It's a constantly evolving process between two continuously changing individuals, shaped by moods, contexts, and shared histories. Your health isn't a permanent possession you keep locked in a vault. It's a precarious, dynamic balance of cellular processes, genetics, and environmental factors interacting second by second. And your identity, the very core of who you think you are, is a constructed narrative. It's built and rebuilt moment by moment from a stream of shifting memories, beliefs, and biological states that evolve dramatically from childhood all the way to old age.
And this brilliantly illustrates why we struggle so much. Nagarjuna captured the tragedy of our psychological friction perfectly when he noted that we are grasping at clouds and wondering why our hands are empty. It's so poetic, isn't it? The immense suffering we experience in life rarely actually comes from the changing nature of reality itself. No, the suffering comes directly from our desperate, white-knuckled grip on the illusion of permanence. We try to freeze a fluid universe. We want a dynamic relationship to remain exactly as it was on day one. We expect our bodies to permanently hold on to the vitality of youth. When we mistakenly expect changing interdependent processes to act like solid, permanent objects, we are literally setting ourselves up for an inevitable heartbreak. We grasp at the mist, and the resulting pain is simply the friction between our rigid expectations and reality's fundamentally fluid nature.
But here is the incredible pivot in Nagarjuna's framework, and it's exactly where this philosophy becomes profoundly empowering. Realizing that things lack solid, independent existence, it is not a depressing realization at all. It is the ultimate liberation. Because think about it, if absolutely nothing possesses a fixed, unchangeable nature, then nothing is permanently bad, nothing is permanently broken, nothing is permanently stuck. Consider a situation in your own life that currently feels completely hopeless, maybe a massive career crisis or a deeply entrenched conflict with someone. Because it lacks inherent existence, it is only dependently hopeless. It relies entirely on specific, current conditions, a certain economic climate, a particular person's mood, or just your current level of understanding. If just one of those variables shifts, the entire architecture of the problem changes. Emptiness isn't the end of possibility, it is the literal foundation of malleability and change.
Let's move to and see how this builds into an essential framework Nagarjuna developed to prevent this philosophy from just detaching us from everyday reality. It's known as the two truths. He insisted that we absolutely must navigate both of these levels simultaneously to live effectively. So on one level, we have conventional truth. At this practical, everyday level, tables hold our coffee cups, traffic requires us to look both ways, pain physically hurts, and human love is deeply consequential. You don't just drift through life pretending nothing matters. But simultaneously, we have to recognize the ultimate truth. At the deepest structural level, none of these phenomena possess solid, permanent independence. A really helpful metaphor here is a rainbow. Conventionally, it's this stunning arc of color that you can clearly see and point to. But ultimately, it has no solid form you can grab. It's merely an optical event dependent on light, moisture, and your specific vantage point. The goal is to appreciate the rainbow fully without trying to lock it in a box. And to prove this wasn't just some fleeting poetic thought, Nagarjuna laid out his arguments with extraordinary, demanding precision. Are you ready for this number? 447. He detailed his philosophy in exactly 447 rigorous verses in his most famous work, the Mula Madhyamaka, or the Fundamental Verses on the Middle Way. It is widely considered one of the most logically devastating philosophical texts ever written. Across those 70 pages, he employs an ancient method of logic to systematically exhaust every single possibility of inherent existence. He meticulously dismantles every assumption we have about time, motion, causation, and the self. It's an absolute intellectual masterclass in deconstruction. But remember, it's not designed to destroy the world. It's designed to free the human mind from its own conceptual limitations. He engaged in this rigorous deconstruction because of a very practical, real-world psychological consequence. Nagarjuna traced almost all human suffering back to what he called fixed views, the stubborn belief that things are permanently what they appear to be. It's statements like, "I am inherently unlovable," "that person is entirely hostile," or "the world is fundamentally dangerous." When we deeply believe these things, those fixed views literally become the bars of a cognitive cage. We substitute the beautiful fluidity of reality for rigid dogmas. And the really great tragedy? It's a cage we build and lock completely by ourselves. Sunyata, therefore, isn't meant to be some new philosophical view that we violently defend. It functions as a universal solvent, perfectly designed to dissolve all rigid views. So, the crucial point is this.
To break us out of that conceptual cage, Nagarjuna offered a gentle, radically liberating medicine. A simple question: are you sure? When you feel completely trapped by a fixed view about yourself, or when a challenging situation feels overwhelmingly permanent, he invites you to genuinely pause and just inquire. Is the situation truly as solid and unyielding as I'm treating it? Is there hidden movement here? Is there an entirely different version of this reality relying on shifting conditions that I haven't even considered? That cognitive space, that brief, tiny opening between a stimulus and your rigid reaction, is sunyata in action. It is the fresh air of possibility rushing in. It's always present, simply waiting for you to recognize it. So I'll leave you with this final thought as we wrap up this explainer. What is one firmly fixed view you are holding on to right now, and what might happen if you simply sat honestly with the uncertainty and realized it might not be as solid as you think?